Daniel Ricciardo found his mojo, didn't he? At least it looks like it. P4 in qualifying session. Unluckily enough, we couldn't really see what Yuki Tsunoda was capable of in this qualifying session. After picking a bunch of penalties, he was serving as an additional front wing to Daniel Ricciardo during Q1 and Q2, and surprisingly enough, Sector 1 was actually the worst sector in whole Daniel's lap, which we will break down right now. So, we will compare Daniel Ricciardo to Sergio Perez, to a man which place Daniel is really looking forward to. Let's see if he is ready enough. Shots are synchronized, and let's move on to this long starting straight. It is actually astonishingly long, and we can also see a huge speed difference between Red Bull and Alpha Tauri. 10 km per hour, and actually I do not think that it is only a car difference. I bet that also Daniel had a higher downforce setup in comparison. But we move on, we see Daniel will brake later than Sergio Perez for this particular corner, which is no surprises at all. And we can already see our friend Daniel Ricciardo with his aggressive steering inputs. But I want to draw your attention that Daniel is managing to bring in more speed. Daniel's line throughout the corner goes like this. Sergio's line around the corner goes like this. And I actually like Daniel's line more. So Daniel managed to do quite a few good things already after the first corner. Now we go into the second corner. Sergio is already on the apex, but he still has a slower speed than Daniel Ricciardo. So Daniel tries to pull out maximum he can out of his setup, out of the fact that he is way slower on the straights comparing to Red Bull. And this is Sector 1, basically one sequence of corners, one braking zone, and 1/10 of a second between Ricciardo and Perez. So let's drag Ricciardo forward and continue to spectate. We go into the braking zone. Once again, Daniel will be a little bit later on braking than Sergio Perez, which is no surprise considering their driving styles. And here we see our good old friend Daniel Ricciardo. Sergio Perez is already entering the corner, but Daniel will enter the corner lately and aggressively on his steering wheel, as he always does, so no changes here. But surprisingly, it actually works out for him. Well, not in this particular corner, because we see Sergio is already ahead, but they also choose some different lines. Once again, Daniel has more tight exit out of first corner than Sergio Perez. Sergio has a wider exit, which will compromise his second corner of the sequence. And Daniel's line actually worked out, because at this point they are already even on the apex. Perez is already on the throttle, but he lacks in speed, so everything is logical, at least. Here quite an interesting detail. Daniel Ricciardo goes off the throttle earlier than he presses brakes. A bit of a Lando Norris style actually I see in Daniel Ricciardo. So those 2 miserable years in McLaren didn't went completely unnoticed. And they exit this second section of the corner, and now it starts this fast sweeping section, actually one of the hardest fast sections in the whole calendar, maybe the hardest, because it has kind of a broken tempo. And we see Daniel once again will brake later than Sergio Perez. Also Daniel is already a bit ahead, and we enter this fast sequence. And for the third time, we see Daniel being tighter on the exit of the first corner of a corner sequence than Sergio Perez, whose line is somewhere around here. And Sergio has to pay his price. He goes off the throttle while Daniel manages to remain full in. And actually a bad luck for Sergio Perez, because his line is kinda wrong and it will mess with the whole following sequence of corners. Here we see a huge difference in braking points, so it looks like, at least for now, Daniel Ricciardo gains more and more confidence going through the lap, while Perez on the other side loses his confidence going through the lap. Interesting. But we move to this corner, we see a huge difference in an entry speed. as a result of Daniel Ricciardo applying more trail braking. And we move towards the end of Sector 2. At the moment, it was the best Sector 2 of Daniel Ricciardo. So 400ths of a second one back. We move Sergio Perez a bit towards Daniel Ricciardo, and we move in the final Sector 3. Once again, a huge difference in braking points, and we see Daniel Ricciardo applying this Norris-style lifting coasting. Interesting stuff. But this Sector 3 is actually not so Ricciardo-ish, if you will allow me this word. He manages to bring in more speed, but he's still on the brakes. Classical Daniel Ricciardo, but from this point, the whole picture will actually change. Sergio Perez is lifting coasting now, which is interesting. But now I want to draw your attention to Daniel Ricciardo's work with the steering wheel. We see him being actually quite smooth. If you saw my Max Verstappen driving style video, we were looking at Daniel at this exact corner, and his steering was like first position, second position, then returning back. Right now, this steering looks way more like Max Verstappen steering. Smooth throughout the whole angle of a steering wheel, and there is actually some change in Daniel's driving style, which I admire to see. And here we enter the last corner. Sergio is actually a bit ahead of Daniel right now, but we know that Daniel will win eventually. So Sergio Perez lost it all in a second corner, and let's find the mistake. He will brake a little bit earlier, but we cannot call it a mistake actually. But the next thing we will see, we can call a mistake. I don't know what Sergio was even thinking about. He's just not using the whole track on the last lap. Quite the basic stuff down here. On your first lap, you want to do the line of your last corner as short as possible. And Sergio just goes like he's in a race mode or something, completely misses this apex, and this results actually in him losing P4 to Daniel Ricciardo. We see Daniel also have a faster last sector, and overall Daniel was just a bit but faster than Sergio. So let's draw some conclusions. I actually admired Daniel Ricciardo's style. For the most part, we see old Daniel Ricciardo being stable on braking, bringing in as much speed as possible, turning in as late as possible, winning as much as you can before the exit of the corner, and trying to lose as less as you can on the exit of the corner. But in Sector 3 we saw some improvements, which resulted in a best sector at least for the first stint in Q3, and everything looks good for Daniel. It looks like this crisis situation just gave him more tools to deal with different cars. Maybe he will become more versatile with his driving style, and maybe this crisis made him even faster. It is still too early to draw some conclusions, but the dynamic is pretty good. And this is it. Thank you very much for your view. Leave a like, subscribe to our channel, leave a comment, and see you soon.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey.